On this episode of 5 Minutes of Cloud, we're going to talk about network as a cloud capability, specifically looking at the network aspects of infrastructure as a service for cloud. So what is network when we talk about cloud computing? When we think about it from the classic data center service, it is one of the constructs that ties all of our data center machines together, our physical servers, our virtual platforms, etc. In the cloud, it's another one of the core services for infrastructure as a service. It turns out it's very important for basically all cloud services. As a matter of fact, the NIST model has broad network access as a core essential characteristic of what makes a cloud. When we think about cloud services, we often think about the whole on-demand, elastic, self-service access aspects of cloud. And when we apply that to networking, we see the same sort of requirements. We need to be able to enable cloud service, basically enable network on demand. So I'd like a different class of network, a different network service that attaches multiple of my compute instances together, for example, or gives me access to a specific storage subsystem, all part of the cloud environment I might be using. Often we're also looking at not just the local connectivity, but with extended services in the network space, we might be looking at virtual private networks, so networks that span multiple sites, potentially even multiple different enterprises or entities that might all be tying together using one of these cloud-based network services. And those services, the connectivity services are the core. That's what we usually think about when we think about network. But there are a number of application level services that are also network specific, that also tie into the same cloud models, on-demand, self-service, elastic, but don't directly map to what one might think of as a network thing. Now, mostly network vendors provide these services, and here we're talking about security services, for example, security at the network level, providing firewall services would be one good example of that. The VPN, virtual private networking, is another example of that same class of functionality. But I think the most pertinent one, the one that most people expect to see in a cloud systems environment, is load balancing as a service. This being a capability that takes our single compute entities and allows us to map them together and have them act, at least from a network access layer, as one scaled out entity. So load balancing as a service is a very important one. We also see a number of additional services that, while in the past might have been physical services, like just the bare metal connectivity, connecting one computer to another, used to be a single wire attached potentially to a distribution unit, a switch or a hub type environment. The virtualization happened in that space almost 20 plus years ago when we had virtual local area networks. And then virtual wide area networks were very common from the very get-go, basically a way of providing secure connectivity across long distances. Well, that virtualization has now led us into the path of software-defined networks that give us all these additional capabilities in the cloud system space, basically overlay networks that map into something that looks a lot like the virtual private networking space, although not necessarily guaranteeing the same level of security. There certainly are SDN systems and overlay networks that provide security as a core construct, but that's not necessarily a requirement. And yet they use the similar class of technologies, tunneling, encapsulation, and other services to obfuscate at the lowest level the connectivity, but provide that API-driven on-demand capability for automating these services. We're also looking at all of the additional network services, things like that load balancing capability or VPN capability. For them to be cloud services, they have to be on demand. They have to be self-service requestable in some fashion. And we're seeing that as a core component within many cloud systems. Like I said, most application deployments in the cloud space where we're looking at potentially scaling something out or providing some kind of resiliency need load balancing as a core feature. Load balancing tends to be a network service. That's the way most people think about it. There are people that will do load balancing at the application level, but that's not really what people expect when they're thinking about network service or cloud services delivered from a networking perspective. So we see load balancing as a service. And we see software-defined networks as a service, again, providing that connectivity, potentially via a tunneling mechanism. Although really software-defined networking is automating or automatable networks. It's being defined in a software sense for services, and because it's automatable, because it is network functionality and ties into data center service, fits very well into the cloud system space. So just a quick recap, we've been looking at network services for cloud, so on-demand self-service services. While there are bare metal environments that support the on-demand class of connectivity management, in general, we're talking about virtual networking services, whether those be load balancing services or just L2, layer 2 connectivity, basically point-to-point connectivity services. And we map that all the way up to capabilities that even tie into the advanced services like firewall capabilities, again, load balancing as a service, and advanced software-defined networking, where we can automate at the application level even connectivity and communication between different services. Thanks for watching. This was Robert Starmer bringing you 5 Minutes of Cloud. 5 Minutes of Cloud is brought to you by Kumulus Technologies, the company I actually work for, and we really appreciate the fact that you actually attended and watched this little segment. We obviously have a YouTube channel here, so please subscribe to that. We have Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. Yeah, I do actually find some interesting things to say on Twitter once in a while. And on top of that, we have a mailing list. If you subscribe to the mailing list, we have a free report, basically 5 pitfalls of cloud that you can avoid if you get my report. So why don't you hop on over to our website, sign up for the mailing list. You'll get that report delivered to your inbox shortly after signing up. And I think that's also another very interesting and important read. Thanks so much again for watching.